Hello guys, and welcome back to the Perfect Timepiece channel. My name is Josh, obviously, and today we are going to be doing a very exciting comparison between the Seiko SKX173 and the Orient Ray II. I just got this Orient Ray II in the mail from my buddy Logan, so shout out to him, but let's hop right on into this comparison. Alright guys, so let us get started in the comparison of these two watches. First, we have the Seiko SKX173 here. This is of course the American version of the 007, coming in at around $225 on Amazon. Now today we are going to be comparing that lovely Seiko SKX to the even lovelier and lower priced Orient Ray II. Wow, these model numbers are escaping me at the moment. But this is $188, so $40 cheaper. And let's get into the actual comparison of these watches. I believe the overall result may end up shocking you, so stay tuned for that. The first category that we are going to talk about today is value, or what these watches offer to you as the consumer. Now, the SKX173 actually is an older watch. The Orient Ray II was just released in 2015 or 2016. So this is a much older watch, and the age is starting to show. But the reason why I'm comparing these two watches are because a lot of people are choosing between the SKX and the Ray II for some of their entry-level divers. So I thought that this would be of some use to you. Anyway, the movement inside the SKX173 is the Seiko 7S26 movement, which does not hack or hand wind. And this is really what sets this watch apart from the Ray II back there. This watch, if you pull out the crown and you try to wind it, or you pull out the crown and you're expecting the second hand to stop moving, then you're wrong in that expectation. It does not hack or hand wind, which can be a bother if you are new to collecting or you change out your pieces a lot and need to use the hacking and hand winding features. Now, other than that, it has a pretty nice bezel, although not as good as the Ray II, and we will talk about the Ray II in a second. But it has some nice polish and brushed finishing on the case, and it doesn't have a signed crown, but at this price point, you know, I'm not too disappointed at that. And it does have a little embossed Seiko tsunami there on the back. So overall, it is a pretty nice watch, and I think it does offer you some decent value for the price. I think it's slightly above average in this category, so I would give it a 7.5 out of 10. Now, the Orient Ray II, I think, is just a notch above the Seiko SKX173 in this category, and hopefully the camera will focus here. But the Orient Ray II, I mean, I don't know, guys. It might just be the blue dial, it might be the red tipped second hand, but I absolutely love this watch, and I thought I would from the moment I saw it. But I do think in terms of value, it is a point above the SKX. First off, the movement does hack and hand wind, so if you pull out this crown, which is actually signed, then the second hand will stop moving and winding the watch will actually charge its power reserve. It also has a day and date complication. The bezel feels just a little bit more solid than the SKX173. Again, this is a much more modern watch, so maybe that mechanism has evolved over time. And it just feels really solid. It has some polishing here on the sides and some brushing on the front, which pretty much matches the SKX. And they're very similar watches. The this Orient Ray II has the dolphin logo at the back, which definitely shines in the light in my studio here. So for that reason, this watch would get an almost perfect score in value if it had a sapphire glass at the front. Now it has a hardened mineral crystal. So for that reason, I think it is a point above the SKX173. I think it earns an 8.5 out of 10 in value. Now, moving on to the next category, movement. This will be a very, very fast and easy discussion because these watches are very similar. The operating frequency on both of these watches is 21,600 vibrations per hour, which equates to 6 ticks per second for the lay person like me. Both watches have a day and date indicator at the 3 o'clock position, and they both have 3 hands. So the only difference really between these watches is the difference in the movement. This has Seiko's own 7S26 movement, which is really reliable and has been field tested for decades at this point. So it has been field tested for decades at this point. It came out in 1996, which was the year that I was born. Now, this Orient Ray II here has pretty much a very, very similar movement. It does operate at 6 ticks per second. It has that day and date wheel at the 3 o'clock position, 3 hands, of course, and it does hack and hand wind, which is a pretty big advantage, I would say, over the SKX173. So given the price, I think the SKX173 is pretty average in this category, and I think the Orient Ray II is just a point above average. So I would say that the SKX over here earns a 7 out of 10 in movement, while the Orient Ray II earns an 8 out of 10. Now, moving on to design, this is a very subjective category. I do think that the SKX has more of a retro feel, while the Orient Ray II has a very modern and elegant look to it. Now, there's no denying that the SKX 173 is designed very utilitarian, with a very utilitarian approach. The arrow hand on the minute hand is very legible, and it stands out from the dial. I think personally this was done to accentuate the diving functionality of this piece. Really, everything about this piece screams like a diver from the 60s. That's kind of the feeling that I get from it. It might not actually be from the 60s, but that's just the impression it gives off to me. Now, I do think that this watch is very, very beautiful. I think it's almost perfect in its design. There aren't really many things that I could nitpick. I wish it had a signed crown. I wish the polishing was a bit better. I wish the finishing on the indices were a little bit better. I think it is pretty good for this price category, but personally I do like the polished metal outer indice edges that the Ray II has over this kind of just painted finishing on this dial. And I know it's hard to see, but if you've touched this watch, you know what I'm talking about. I do think the side look of this watch is the most appealing. It definitely gives off the 60s era styling there. And then the Seiko Tsunami at the back is also very appealing. This strap is somewhat lackluster, but it does the job, so I really can't fault the watch there. It's again maybe half a step below almost perfect, so I would give this an 8.5 out of 10 in the design category. Now, moving on to the Orient Ray II. This is a much newer diver. This is, as I said, this just came out in 2015 or 2016. I apologize that I don't know the exact date, but this is kind of a rushed video. But again, this has a much more modern look. The outer edges of those indices are polished. Hopefully you can see that really well right about there. And the blue dial especially is just mind-blowing. You know, I know that everybody isn't like me. I have a special affinity for blue dials, and I have a special affinity for red-tipped second-hands. So my first impression is to give this like a perfect score in design. I do like the modern pieces. It has a signed crown. And it does come with a metal bracelet. I'm sorry that I don't have that for this video. Definitely stay tuned to the channel so you can see the review where I'll have the metal bracelet on this. But anyway, getting sidetracked, I do think that the design category ultimately is up to you, but I do think that this earns, you know, an almost perfect score, you know, 8.5 out of 10. It has a really nice design, especially for the money. It's just, it's a no-brainer. Like, I'm seriously considering going on Amazon and purchasing this watch for myself right now. And there are links down in the description down below to purchase either of these two watches. If you use them, you support the channel, so I really appreciate it. Moving on to usability. Now, I gave the Orient Ray II just a slightly higher score. The Seiko SKX has a few advantages in this category, actually, namely the Hardlex crystal on the front of the case here. And it doesn't reflect as much light as the mineral crystal, so it's less scratch resistant, or it's more scratch resistant, excuse me, and it reflects a little bit less light than the Ray II, so I think those are the positives. The negatives, there is some considerable play with the bezel, which is hard for me to get a shot of here, but it does kind of move back and forth to a degree that I would not like to see at this price point, especially after I've spent some time with the Orient Ray II. I think Seiko missed a few opportunities here. Namely, you know, this isn't a hacking or hand-winding movement. There is no signed crown. The knurling on the bezel I'm not a huge fan of, even though it does add to that iconic design. So I do think there were a few missed opportunities here, and for that reason, you know, I have to give the watch a 7.5 out of 10 in usability. I think it is above average. I think it's incredibly legible. The glass is more scratch resistant than the Orient Ray II. They both have the same water resistance levels. So, you know, in that regard, I think the SKX earns a 7.5 out of 10, as I said. Now, the Orient Ray II is fairly similar. Let me get a better shot here. The Orient Ray II definitely is very similar to the SKX in terms of the problems that it has. You know, this glass is hardened mineral crystal, so it isn't a sapphire glass, which I initially thought it was. And so it can get scratched, although it isn't a domed sapphire glass, or a domed mineral crystal, so it isn't as prone to scratches, but it will pick up scratches. It can shatter. I wish they put a sapphire glass on this. I think it would definitely bump up the score in this category for the watch. Again, this scored a little bit higher than the SKX simply because of the better bezel. The crown is a little bit easier to unscrew, and this does have a hacking and hand-winding movement, which does come into play when you're like me and you own a lot of watches and you have to change them out all the time and you have to wind them. So that is definitely something to consider. Now, moving on to the final category of our review. I know, thank you for sticking with it, guys. You guys are troopers. We have quality. Now, I do think the SKX in this scenario is fairly average. There are a few things that Seiko just didn't do with this watch that Orient did. For example, the kind of finishing on those indices, things that I've mentioned before. The play in the bezel, the crown that isn't a screw-down crown. They do have this nice embossed back here, which the Orient doesn't have, but their strap is kind of lackluster. It's just a plain old rubber strap, and as I said, this Orient back here does come on a metal band, although I don't have it for this review. Now the Orient, is just ever so slightly better. I would say a 7.5 out of 10, whereas the SKX got a 7 out of 10 in this category for quality, simply because, those indices are very, very neatly designed with that nice polishing, finishing all the way around the edges of those indices. The nice blue dial is incredibly hard to get right, and I think they nailed it, which is incredible considering the watch's price point. And then, you have a signed crown, a little bit of a better bezel. I don't know, I think this probably earns an 8 out of 10 instead of a 7.5, honestly. I think it is a point above the SKX, especially when you factor in the fact that this comes with a very sturdy metal bracelet, and the SKX only comes with a rubber one. So, given all of that, let us take a moment to tally the final scores for these watches and crown a winner. So the SKX173 earns a total of 75 points out of 100, while the Orient Ray II earns 82 points out of 100, which is crazy considering the price of the Orient Ray II. We've had divers on this show that double the price that, only get an 83. So 82 is very respectable. That being said, if you're a fan of the iconic design and the legacy of the SKX173, then definitely go with that one. It's only $40 more. And again, this earns a 75 out of 100. So that wraps up our comparison. Let me switch the cameras around and give you a proper goodbye. So that wraps up our review or our comparison of the Seiko SKX173 and the Orient Ray II. Definitely leave me a comment in the comment section down below, basically telling me everything that I did wrong. This is, my name is Josh. You've been watching Perfect Timepiece. I hope you all enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you all next time. Bye.